A few weeks ago, I came across an article from France Football that dates back to the end of the 2004-05 season. The article detailed the 20 best paid footballers on earth at the time and included a breakdown of their salaries, divided between their wages and commercial interests. It was quite an interesting read more than 15 years on, and I'll come to the list itself in just a moment, but it got me thinking about the way in which the finances of football have changed even in what is a relatively short period of time in the context of the entire history of the sport. If you were able to cast your minds back to 2005, it was a time which Ronaldinho was still widely considered to be the best player in the world. AC Milan had the most dominant team in Europe, and two-time European Golden Shoe winner Thierry Henry couldn't stop scoring. Chelsea became Premier League champions in Jose Mourinho's first season at the helm, conceding just 15 goals across an entire 38-game league campaign. Liverpool mounted one of the greatest comebacks of all time to beat AC Milan on penalties in the Champions League final, having been 3-0 down at half-time, and Sao Paulo had assembled a phenomenal team over in South America, defeating Atletico Paranaense in the final of the Copa Libertadores, and Champions League winners Liverpool in the final of the FIFA Club World Championship. I'm just trying to set the scene, and if you want a reminder of some of the events that happened outside the world of football in 2005, well, it was the year in which Hurricane Katrina devastated large parts of Louisiana, and particularly the city of New Orleans. Tom Cruise confirmed what many had long suspected, that he is slightly deranged, by jumping up and down on a sofa on Oprah, and the popular video sharing platform YouTube was founded, without which you would most likely only be able to enjoy my world-class content in written form, although I've always considered that to be a preferable experience to having to listen to my voice regardless. Anyhow, back to football and wages in 2005, and I suspect it will come as a little surprise to most of you that the highest earning footballer in 2005 was David Beckham. Good old Golden Balls was the most marketable footballer on the planet for at least a decade, if not the most of all time, and he raked in a record-breaking £16.9 million in 2005, while starring for Real Madrid. Whilst Beckham was probably at the peak of his powers at the end of the 1990s and into the early 2000s, as the money in football increased, along with his global stardom, so too did his income. Incredibly, Beckham remained the highest earning player on the planet right up to the moment in which he retired, when one combines wages and commercial income. Once more, for those of you at the back who may have missed that, every single year from the early 2000s up until 2013, when he hung up his boots following half a season with Paris Saint-Germain, David Beckham was the best paid football player on the planet. Neither Lionel Messi nor Cristiano Ronaldo, who by 2013 were already being talked about as two of the greatest footballers of all time, and had already established total hegemony over the Ballon d'Or, an award that David Beckham never won even in his prime, could exceed the earnings of a 38-year-old David Beckham who had spent the last 6 years sunning it up in Los Angeles, and hadn't won an England cap in over 4 years. Even now, in 2021, 7.5 years on from Beckham's retirement, there are only 3 footballers who earn more than him according to Forbes' most recent estimates, and their research is likely to miss out on some of Beckham's diversified revenue streams. It's difficult to stress what a remarkable job Brand Beckham did and continues to do within the world of business, and relative to their talent, no other player has marketed themselves so successfully in the entire history of the sport, or even come close. Whilst Beckham was the highest earner overall in 2005, he didn't have the highest playing wage. That title belonged to another Englishman, namely Frank Lampard, with an annual salary of £5.1 million at Chelsea, which was more than the likes of Ronaldinho, Zinedine Zidane, and anyone else within the world game for that matter. Lampard signed a new deal at Stamford Bridge in 2004, worth around £100,000 a week, meanwhile his Chelsea teammate John Terry also ranked in the overall top 10. Unfortunately for Lampard, his global and domestic marketability was nothing like Beckham's, and whilst the England captain was able to rake in £12.5 million in commercial revenue in 2005, Lampard's endorsement deals were worth a comparatively modest £1.3 million. It was a similar situation with John Terry, who had an enormous salary given to him by Uncle Roman, but never had the worldwide appeal of a Beckham or a Zidane. Ronaldo was the overall second highest earner, Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima that is of course, followed by Zinedine Zidane. All 3 of Beckham, Zidane and Ronaldo were said to be on the same £4.4 million salary at Real Madrid, meaning the differences between the world's 3 best players came entirely from commercial revenue. Beckham pocketed a reported £16.9 million overall, Ronaldo £13.3 million, and Zizou a paltry £8.8 million. Almost half of his more celebrated, albeit a little less gifted English teammate. Those three were followed by Christian Vieri in 4th place on £8.1 million, Alessandro Del Piero on £6.5 million, Frank Lampard on £6.4 million, Raul Gonzalez on £6.3 million, Thierry Henry on £6.2 million, John Terry on £5.8 million, and Luis Figo on £5.7 million, rounding off the top 10. So how does all that compare to the salaries and endorsement deals in football in 2021? And are there any interesting insights that we can take away from those numbers? Well, first and foremost, it won't surprise you to discover that the money in football has increased enormously since 2005. Even David Beckham, who retired in 2013, earns far more money now than he did in 2005, as does Zinedine Zidane in fact, whose salary as Real Madrid boss in 2021 is considerably higher than his salary as a Real Madrid player in his penultimate season as a professional in 2005, according to all reports. The same cannot be said for Frank Lampard at Chelsea, Thierry Henry at Montreal Impact, or John Terry as a coach at Aston Villa, but I'm getting sidetracked. If we compare like for like, the 10 highest earners in 2005 versus the 10 highest earners now, there is a rather sizable gulf between the two. In 2020, Lionel Messi was the highest paid player on the planet, raking in more than £92 million according to Forbes. Unsurprisingly, he is followed by Cristiano Ronaldo, who made just shy of £86 million. There's a slight drop-off to Neymar on £70 million in 3rd, followed by a steep drop-off to £30 million for Kylian Mbappe in 4th. Although, that's still not a bad income at 22, all things considered. Mohamed Salah, Paul Pogba, Antoine Griezmann, Gareth Bale, Robert Lewandowski and David De Gea complete the top 10, all earning between £27 to £20 million according to Forbes. It's important to note that those are not the players' base salaries, and it's here that we come to our first difference between 2005 and now. In 2005, David Beckham was the best paid footballer on earth, and 74% of his income was through commercial revenue, rather than his actual contract at Real Madrid. If you compare that to 2020's highest earner, Lionel Messi, only 27% of his income is through commercial revenue streams, with the vast majority, more than £67 million, paid directly to him by FC Barcelona. Unlike Beckham, Messi is both the best paid by his club and the highest overall earner in world football, and the difference between his club's salary of £67 million and the highest earner Frank Lampard on £5.1 million in 2005 is absolutely enormous, with Messi's salary worth more than 13 times as much. Cristiano Ronaldo is more reliant on commercial revenue than Messi, with commercial revenue accounting for around 40% of his annual income, but that's still a long way shy of Beckham's 74% in 2005. What we can take away from this is that whilst the money in advertising and brand deals for footballers has increased dramatically since 2005, it has been vastly outpaced by the increase in money within football itself, thanks largely to the amount of money swimming around at clubs these days due to the exponential growth in TV revenue. Whilst the three best paid players on the planet, Messi, Ronaldo and Neymar, earn absolutely exorbitant amounts even in comparison to their 2005 counterparts, the rest of the top 10 roughly earn 3 times as much as the 10 highest earners in 2005, which is not as extreme of an increase as some might expect. The biggest increases, with the exception of Messi, Ronaldo and Neymar, has come outside of the superstars, and outside of those players who are able to secure multi-million-dollar endorsement deals. When Arsenal won the Premier League title in 2002, the average wage at the club was just £10,000 a week. I say just, that is obviously still a hefty salary, but the average wage across the entire Premier League is now around £60,000 a week, and the average wage of a title-winning team is in excess of £100,000 a week. In fact, rather extraordinarily, 2020 Premier League winners Liverpool are reported to pay an average of £5.54 million a year to their players, which is more than the world's best paid player, in terms of club salaries, Frank Lampard earned in 2005. The average at a single club is now greater than the highest earner in 2005. That is quite something over a 15 to 16 year time span. The average annual salary in the Premier League in 2005 was £630,000, and now it is almost £3 million, although it has just continued a trend that started long before 2005, given that the average weekly wage in the Premier League's inaugural campaign in 1992-93 was less than £80,000. Since we have become a bit bogged down in just the Premier League, I'll try to offer up an English-based insight, which is that in 2005, 8 of the top 20 highest earners in world football played in the Premier League. In 2020, 7 of the top 20 highest earners in world football played in the Premier League. The lesson there might seem that not much has changed, but it's actually indicative of the shift that we have already talked about. The top earners are still spread between Europe's top clubs, but the average wage in the Premier League and the salaries of more mediocre players has increased at a much faster rate in the Premier League than it has in any other league. It's also interesting to note that 4 of the world's top 20 earners in 2020 play their football in Asia compared to none in 2005, thanks primarily to the enormous investments within the Chinese Super League in recent years. If we return to the superstars for just a moment, one of the lessons of this comparison is the continued growth of football in relation to other sports. Whilst David Beckham was unrivaled as a global superstar within the world of football in 2005, his overall earnings were still some way behind the best paid athletes at the time. No sports person earned more than Tiger Woods that calendar year, who raked in some $87 million, equivalent to roughly £45 million at the time. A reminder that Beckham's annual salary was just shy of £17 million, meaning that Woods earned more than 2.5 times as much as Beckham. In second place was Michael Schumacher, who earned $60 million, and then there was a big drop-off to the golden boy of US boxing at the time, Oscar De La Hoya, who brought in $38 million. Beckham's income in dollars was put at $32.5 million, putting him in 7th place out of all athletes, sandwiched between NBA superstars Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, and the only footballer within the top 10. If we compare that to 2020, we can see that football superstars are now sports superstars, and it's no longer one man flying the flag for the world's most popular sport. Roger Federer was reportedly the world's best paid athlete in 2020, but the next 3, Messi, Ronaldo and Neymar, are all footballers, and all 3 come in ahead of anyone from the worlds of golf, boxing, basketball, baseball, Formula 1 or American football. Admittedly, there are no other footballers within the top 20, but there are plenty from 21 through to 50, and it shows that star power in football has increased. Of course, that is partly because Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo are 2 of the greatest athletes, never mind footballers, to have ever lived, but it is still significant. It's also interesting to note that Messi, Ronaldo and Neymar probably are the 3 most talented players of their generation. Certainly, I would argue that they are, and they are by far the highest earners of 2020. Rewind to 2005 and the 3 highest earners were David Beckham, Ronaldo and Zinedine Zidane. I love all 3, but Beckham was never among the 3 most talented players of his generation. Ronaldo and Zidane most certainly were, but by 2005, Ronaldo was basically in his final proper season in Europe, and Zidane was a year away from retirement. It seems bizarre that Ronaldinho, who probably was the most electric player on the planet at the time and won the 2005 Ballon d'Or, is nowhere to be seen in the top 10, and nor is Kaká, who was absolutely extraordinary for AC Milan at the time. One of the reasons for that difference between 2005 and 2020 is the anomaly that is David Beckham, which I've already talked about. But there does seem to be more of a general shift towards the best players earning the biggest money, which, whilst roughly true in 2005, was a lot more inconsistent, and that makes perfect sense when you think about it. With players increasingly reliant on income from their clubs rather than through commercial revenue streams, at least in percentage terms, it is only natural that their income will correspond more strongly with their performance levels and talent rather than purely with their marketability. Just before I leave you, a quick comparison between 2005 and 2020 in terms of managers. Back in 2005, Jose Mourinho was the best paid manager in the world. The special one was being paid £5 million a year by Chelsea, almost exactly the same amount as Frank Lampard, meaning that the Blues had both the best paid player and the best paid manager in terms of purely club salaries on the planet. He was followed by Sir Alex Ferguson on £4 million a year, England manager Sven-Göran Eriksson on £3.95 million a year, and Arsenal boss Arsene Wenger on £3 million a year. Amongst other things, you will notice that the 4 best paid managers on the planet in 2005 all resided in the tiny little Western European nation of England. You won't be surprised to discover that the world's best paid manager no longer earns the same as the world's best paid player, given the extraordinary salaries of Messi, Ronaldo and Neymar. There are, however, multiple clubs where the manager earns more than any of the club's playing staff. Diego Simeone is the world's best paid manager, reportedly paid €43.6 million a year, which is far more than any of the playing staff at Atletico Madrid. He's followed by Antonio Conte, whose £390,000 a week earnings make him the best paid individual at Inter Milan. And finally, the world's 3rd best paid head coach, Pep Guardiola, with a reported salary worth £350,000 a week, earns the same as Manchester City's 2 best paid players. As you can see, the salaries for managers have exploded just as dramatically as they have for the players across the board. They just haven't quite been able to keep pace with the ginormous salaries of the world's 3 best paid players. Yet again, we also see the rise of the Chinese Super League with managers, with 3 of the world's 10 best paid managers currently employed in the world's most populous nation, compared to an unsurprising big fat 0 back in 2005. Jose Mourinho may have slipped from being the world's best paid manager in 2005 to the 4th best paid in 2020, but his salary has still tripled from £5 million to £15 million. And that's before you account for whatever Paddy Power are paying him to star in their adverts, along with his deals with Heineken, Hublot and Jaguar, each said to be worth £2 million, among others. Yes, managers are seemingly much more marketable in the 2020s than they ever were in 2005. So the lesson is clear. If you want to make lots of money in football, you want to be born as late as possible, be as talented as Messi, as good looking as David Beckham, and play in China. It's as simple as that. That is it for today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. I did, but then again, I am well aware that I am far from normal. Nevertheless, please do absolutely annihilate the like button if you found any entertainment or enjoyment in it. Let me know your weird and wonderful thoughts down in the comments section, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens so that you always know when I've uploaded one of my masterpieces. If you're a real mega fan and you use the type of social media platforms that have been exploited so superbly to tear the fabric of nations apart and undermine democracy in recent years, you can find me on either Twitter or Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both platforms.